Hello, Florence, my lovely. Are we ready for chapter 15? It's called Rosie Sparrow. Rosie? Asked Mary. Rosie Sparrow? The maid seemed to wake up slowly, though she had been sitting up and her eyes were wet with tears. Yes, she said quietly. Rosie, we're, Mrs. Ribbon and no New Dog, said Ada. We're friends of Miss Rebecca's, Mary continued. She asked us to find out why you confessed to a crime you didn't commit. Miss Rebecca asked you? Murmured Rosie, as though from a distance. She knows in her heart that you're innocent, Mary persevered. Tell me, did you take the acorn? The acorn, replied the imprisoned maid. The pendant, her birthday gift. Did you take it? Yes, I did, replied Rosie. We know that already, huffed Ada. Mary shot her a look, but Ada missed it. Yes, Rosie, we are aware of what you said you did, but I must beg of you to trust us. Miss Rebecca wants you to trust us. We know you didn't actually do it, did you? No, said Rosie quietly. There, and I believe you. Now, why ever did you confess to taking the acorn when you did not? Rosie looked like she was about to return to the tears she had been crying before the girls arrived. It would break my Rebecca's heart for her to know the truth, she blurted suddenly. But Rosie, assured Mary, it is breaking her heart to know that you are here in prison when you've done nothing wrong. She has done something wrong, said Ada. She lied to the constabulary, lied to her friend and her employer, and kept the real criminal out of the newspaper. Prison. Ada. Ribbon, corrected Ada. That's a terrible thing to say, rebuked Mary. It is not a good thing to do either, said Ada angrily. It doesn't make sense. Are you suggesting, said Mary to Rosie, that if Rebecca found out who really took the acorn, it would be worse for her than it is knowing that you're here in this awful place? Rosie fought the urge to cry and nodded. So all of this is to save Rebecca's feelings? Rosie sniffed and nodded again. Bo, said Mary quietly. Told you, said Ada. What? How do you... Please, you mustn't tell Miss Rebecca, begged Rosie. She loves him so, and it would break her heart if she knew Mr. Datchery was the thief. But I don't understand, said Mary. As her friend, wouldn't you want to stop her from marrying a bad man? That's just it, replied Rosie. He's not a bad man. He's a very good man. I don't know what could have possibly possessed him to steal the pendant, but I saw him do it. Well, everyone was downstairs, and I saw him coming out of Rebecca's room. I gasped. I was that shocked, but he never noticed. He had the necklace in his hand. He just carried it down the hallway, staring at it the whole time like it was something from his dreams. Then, the next morning, when Rebecca discovered it was missing. I told her I had stolen it. She'd be crushed to find if he took it, and there'd be such a scandal. And think of Mr. Datchery's reputation. If he stole it, he is a criminal, and he should be in here, and not you, said Ada. Somehow the iron bars reminded her of the lines between the narrow columns in the newspaper, and the gray stone reminded her of the pages themselves. Grim but tidy. It would break Miss Rebecca's heart if the man she loved were here. It's breaking her heart that you are here, continued Mary. Rosie, what if we can find a way to solve this riddle? There must be some explanation. And if we can find it, then we can restore the acorn, present the explanation, and get you out of this dreadful place. For the first time, Rosie smiled. She nodded and wiped a tear. I dared not hope that such a thing were possible. Well, I'm certain it is possible. Miss Ribbon here is extremely clever, and I've no doubt that she will get to the bottom of this. Thank you, said Rosie. Thank you ever so. Mary squeezed Rosie's hands through the bars. Memory served as their guide out of the dungeon back toward the dim cavern behind the stout front doors. Mary gave the oak a sharp, desperate knock, which reverberated through the shadows of the prison. The door opened a crack, and welcome daylight rushed into the hall. Can I help you? Asked the man from the guard box. It's us. We came in and we'd like to get out again now, said Mary. Well, I can't just let people out of prison, can I? And why ever not? Lose my job, I would. What kind of prison guard would I be if I let people out all willy-nilly? Not a very good one, I imagine, admitted Mary, but we're Yes, impoverished orphans, said Mary with some desperation. You don't look it, said the guard. Thank you. Now please let us out. Nope, sorry. You need a letter of release from the magistrate before I can let you out. And I don't see too many of them at that. You've got to be Lord or Lady such and such to even ask for one. That's how it works. But you just let us in. It is one thing. In is one thing. Out needs paperwork. Ada concentrated, remembering bits from the newspaper reading. And do you have a warrant? Ada asked. Begging your pardon, miss. A warrant for our arrest. I've read all about them, and we can't be here without a warrant. Have you got one? But I don't know who you are, so how can I know if there's a warrant for you? Well, there's no sense in asking us, said Ada. If we were criminals, we'd simply lie about our names so the warrants wouldn't match, and you'd have to be letting us out. Interesting point, miss. In that case, I'll have to keep you in. Mary was starting to panic at the thought of remaining on the wrong side of the heavy, dark, forbidding door. Impoverished orphans, she repeated. The fact remains, stated Ada calmly, that you have no warrant for our arrest. And as you have us imprisoned here, I'm afraid we'll have to call the constabulary. But I am the constabulary, miss. Very well, then I shall ask you to consider yourself under arrest and place yourself in prison. The guard was quite surprised and quite confused. Under arrest? Myself? For what? Kidnapping, clearly, said Ada. Here you are, keeping 2 impoverished orphans locked up without so much as a warrant. That's a crime, and you're a constable. You're supposed to arrest criminals, so you'd best get to it. Steady on, said the poor guard. That does not seem quite... You're impossible, shouted Ada, getting truly angry. There's a kidnapping going on, and you're just standing there. Aren't you going to stop it? You're supposed to be a constable. I don't know how exactly, stammered the man. Ada rolled her eyes and stomped her foot, and she was very, very good at it. You let us go, is how it is, exactly, she said curtly. Yes, well, that does seem to make sense, admitted the guard, grateful for a way out of this hopelessly confusing situation. Ada glared at the man and then at his hand on the door ring and back at him, her eyes flashing menace. With an he opened the door wider, allowing the young detective to escape the prison and inhale deeply of the air of the wonderful, filthy, soggy London street. Outside was most definitely, perfectly better than inside. I love that she used that strong personality of hers to talk her way out of prison. Chapter 16 is called The Fishmonger. Across the road, the waiting coach seemed a refuge. Mary resisted the urge to run for it. She walked sedately, holding Ada's hand, even pausing politely to let a cluster of nuns scurry by. Then a curious shape caught her eye. In fact, it was 3 curious shapes, or one curious shape repeated 3 times. 3 red fezzes, like upturned flower pots, worn by men not looking at each other and whistling. Don't look, cautioned Mary, entering the carriage. Don't look at what? Asked Ada. 3 men, trying to look inconspicuous. She cast an inquisitive look at Ada and regretted it instantly. I know what inconspicuous means. You see 3 men trying hard not to be seen. They're obviously not very good at being inconspicuous. There they are. I see those 3 men right there. I'm sorry, I forget you know everything, except your maid's name. Chuzzlewit? Offered Ada. Cumberland. Honestly, Ada, nobody is named Chuzzlewit. Cumberland. Honestly, Ada, no one is named Chuzzlewit. That makes me laugh. And mesmerism, I don't know what that is. Not yet. After a pause, Mary added, I've seen them before. Who? Whom, corrected Mary. Whom? The 3 men in the red fezzes, trying to be inconspicuous. They were watching us outside of the Verdigris mansion. Do they look like criminals? Asked Ada. I don't think so. They were very well dressed. Ada didn't know much about men's fashions and left it to Mary to decide if the men in red fezzes really were well dressed or not. Ada dared a glance out the rear carriage window as they drove off, And indeed, there they were, three finely turned out gentlemen in red fezzes. One wore a sort of lapel pin or medal that flashed a sunburst as best as it was able in the autumn gloom. She looked back to Mary, hoping they hadn't seen her looking. They might as well be well-dressed criminals, Ada suggested. I'm sure that's possible, but do you think they're our criminals? Mary asked. I doubt it. Rosie has already told us that Beau is the criminal. Besides, if the three men in red fezzes had the acorn, I can't imagine why they would be following us. They must want it and are hoping we'll find it. You read the book. Is it valuable? The book? Asked Ada. No, silly, the acorn. Oh, I don't know. It's not a diamond or anything. It's a moonstone. Sodium, potassium, aluminium silicate. It is extremely ancient, from Ankara in Turkey. And aside from its power of mesmerism, and we don't even know what that means, it's just what? Pretty, decided Ada. Pretty? I don't think I've ever heard you call anything that, said Mary in surprise. Anyway, Turkey sounds terribly exotic. I'd love to travel there someday. We shouldn't go tell Rebecca about Beau, Ada said. Or we should go tell her, changing the subject. Well, said Mary carefully, being reminded of Peebs the spy, this is a delicate situation. The right thing to do would be to give Beau a chance to explain himself, and then we can present the facts to Rebecca. Why? Because, Mary said guiltily, sometimes you need to be careful about what you say and when you say it. Well, that's silly. There are just things to know and people who should know them, and that's that. At this, the guilty, squishy balloon in Mary's chest swelled to the point where she had trouble breathing. It was a very short carriage ride between Newgate Prison and the Marylebone House, barely 2.5 miles, a fact Mary found unsettling. As large as London was, the greatest city in the world, it seemed not quite large enough, being so close to so horrible a place. As Ada paid the coachman, Mary suddenly remembered something. Peebs. Not the terrible secret that weighed so heavily on her heart, but Peebs, the tutor who would have been expecting the girls in the drawing room over an hour ago. Peebs, she cried, however shall we explain to ourselves? Oh, don't worry about him, said Ada, climbing down. I had Mr. Franklin lock him in the distillery closet again. Again? What do you mean again? Asked Mary, aghast. Like yesterday. Ada, you simply can't go around locking people up in distillery closets. Fine, he can be in the pantry tomorrow. Besides, I'm sure he's out by now. As the girls were unexpected, there was no Mr. Franklin at the door to greet them, and as they were unexpected. So Ada marched right in, the mud from her boots leaving marks on the gleaming white floor as she strode toward the upstairs kitchen. Mary followed, thinking of poor Anna Cumberland, who would have to clean up Ada's mess once again, if once again meant all the time without ever stopping. Mary half expected to see Anna in the kitchen, or perhaps Mr. Franklin, or even the recently released Peebs, although Mary was sure she would prefer the distillery closet to Newgate Prison. What she did not expect to see was Ada holding a very large and rather nasty-looking knife the length of her arm and pointing it at a total stranger in the kitchen. Who are you? Ada demanded. And what are you doing in my house? Pardon me, miss, I'm just the new fishmonger. The man kept his back to Ada and unwrapped several fresh fish, kippers and skates, and one red herring, from rolls of brown paper. There was even an eel glistening wetly on the counter. He pressed his hands to show they were empty, and Ada caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his forearm, the letter S, and others, although she couldn't quite catch what they were. As you can see, fish. So, sorry I frightened you. I'll be on my way, begging your leave. And without turning, he left his parcels on the kitchen counter and practically fled out the back door. Yikes! That's pretty scary. What's a fishmonger? Ada asked without moving or lowering her lethal-looking knife. Someone who mongs fish, answered Mary, although she knew at once that wasn't right. Sells, delivers fish to kitchens. He left his knife here. Is that his knife? Asked Mary, looking at the one in Ada's hands. No, there by the paper. Sure enough, beside the floppy, dead, and moist eel on the counter was a long, skinny knife with a curved handle blade. It had a little hole at the end of the handle, and a short loop of leather was run through it. He must have been in quite a hurry, said Ada. You'd think he'd need that. He probably thought you were going to chop his head off with that thing, said Mary. No, he turned around as soon as he saw me, before I picked up my knife. This knife. Can you please put that down? You're making me terribly nervous. Ada put down the long butcher's knife. There was something familiar about him. She walked toward the fishmonger's knife and gave it a sniff. Well, if he's your fishmonger, perhaps you've seen him before. I don't think that's it. He said he was a new fishmonger. Smells fishy. I can hardly follow you, Ada. What smells fishy? All of it, especially his knife. Well, of course it does. It's a fish knife from a fishmonger. If it smelled like cheese, it would be unusual. No, said Ada. It's this particular fishy smell that smells fishy. I recognize it, but can't remember from where. Mary hadn't thought of it before, but while she was certain that there were many different kinds of fish, they all seemed simply to smell fishy to her. But she had to admit that Ada's sense of smell was as sharp as the fishmonger's knife, which she held up under her nose like a curved steel mustache. All right, my lovely. That's it for today. I love you.